What is the most disturbing thing to know? I worked as a palliative carer for about 3 years. I looked after terminally ill people who had chosen to die at home after being discharged from hospital. After a while, you learn some telltale signs that people are deteriorating. After a bit longer, you start to learn how long people generally have left, even down to a few hours. I always went with honesty. I felt it was my job to support the patients' families as well as the patients, so if they asked how long I thought they had left, I would answer honestly. Obviously with the disclaimer that I wasn't a doctor and I could only base it on my previous experiences. The wife of one of my patients told me that their children, adults, were visiting the following weekend to say their goodbyes. I had to decide carefully on what to say next, but I ultimately chose to recommend that they visit the following day, at the latest. I regretted saying it because she was devastated. She took my advice and her husband passed away peacefully 48 hours later, after seeing his kids. I am glad I did it, but upsetting that lady was absolutely gut-wrenching. Some people didn't want to know, and it was their right not to know. That was the worst. In those cases, you had to not say anything. Sometimes they'd say see you tomorrow and I had to reply, yes, have a good night and I'll see you in the morning, knowing full well that they were going to pass in the night. Edit. Wow. Thank you all for your kind words. It is a very difficult but rewarding job. I am no longer a carer, but I often think about whether I would be able to do it again. I've had one question asked a lot in the replies, so I'll answer it here. Death, like life, is different for everybody. Certain conditions will cause the body to deteriorate in different ways. I am going to spoiler this next bit because it might be too much for some to read. COPD was a common condition I saw. That was a gradual decline until the patient could no longer breathe and the oxygen just wasn't able to get in anymore. Heart failure was similar, a very drawn-out process. I cared for a lot of cancer patients, some younger than my parents, which was quite distressing. What tended to happen was the symptoms they already presented would worsen, beyond the point that their medication could alleviate it. They would lose energy, ultimately being bedbound. The biggest giveaway was when they no longer wanted to drink water. That was usually a 72-hour warning. When they were very close, their skin would start to mottle and go pink, purple. I am not 100% sure why it happened, but I think it was because the heart was struggling to get the blood around and it would settle. However, generally you could just tell that the person you'd been seeing for days, weeks, months or even years just wasn't the same as they were a few days before. Changes could be gradual or sudden. I went to work with the philosophy that death comes for everybody. If it were me being cared for, then I would want to be cared for in a certain way. The way I tried to care for everybody whose homes I entered. Early childhood malnutrition, between ages 0 to 5, causes irreversible loss of IQ, 11 to 20 points, and predisposes people to higher levels of violence. Prefrontal cortex doesn't develop the same, and if you miss that window, there's no intervention that can recover the gap. I live in South Africa. Highest Gini coefficient in the world, highest unemployment, third highest violent crime rate, one of the worst education systems in the world, and it effing keeps me up at night. I wonder, if we changed nothing except introducing a one nutritious meal per day feeding scheme for ECD, what would happen? It hurts. Cruise liners all have a morgue for all the passengers that inevitably die each trip. One of the scariest and most disturbing thing I've watched in the internet is that one guy's slow descent to insanity because its brain lost its ability to sleep. He vlogged regularly until he died. That's one of the most disturbing things I know. That anyone, including myself, can have their last sleep without knowing it. Edit. The guy had a UTI. He didn't have insurance, so he took an antibiotic. After 2 weeks, he lost his ability to sleep because of the side effect of that antibiotic. If an elephant's mate dies, then they can die from broken heart syndrome. We enforce retirement ages in many critical fields like medicine and engineering due to scientifically provable cognitive decline, but we also allow people in their 70s and 80s to regularly govern our countries and our lives. Edit. Some of you are stating that there are no legal limits on the age of physicians and engineers. I never said there were laws regarding age limits. In medicine, many hospitals and health organizations have implemented cognitive testing requirements for aging physicians. The physicians are suing for age discrimination, but the change in policies are happening and should be happening. Certified professional engineers are required to go through continuing education and to recertify during their careers, which creates effectively the same check to stop people from practicing when they can no longer practice safely. Making an elderly person repeat, person, woman, man, camera, TV, is not remotely enough of a cognitive test to drive, let alone run the freaking country. The Chichijima incident that took place in 1944. Japanese soldiers shot down an airplane with 9 passengers on board. 8 of them were beaten and tortured before they were beheaded. After their death, Japanese soldiers ate body parts of 4 of the men out of those 8. The 9th one to escape was George H.W. Bush. It's not as disturbing as I am sure the others are going to be in this thread, but it definitely made me think about how history could have been altered had he been one of the victims of execution and cannibalism here. A cardiac tamponade is when your heart literally chokes itself to death. If a blood vessel inside the pericardium leaks, a tough membrane protecting the heart the heart's pumping will force blood into the space between itself and the pericardium. As the space fills, the heart can't pump anymore due to a lack of space. It literally drowns in your own blood. The Nutty Putty cave accident. Google for full disturbing details. A map of the cave, but basically a guy got stuck caving in a very narrow unmapped tunnel, upside down. They could not get him out, but almost did. One of the rescuers made eye contact with him apparently, but then their pulley system broke and he fell further down. Unfortunately, he ended up dying of cardiac arrest from being upside down for so long, and they couldn't get him out. Never retrieved the body because it was too dangerous for rescuers. Truly so disturbing. I've thought about it probably once a week since I found out about it a few months ago. By the time you show the symptoms of rabies, it's already too late. It can also be dormant for a year before you show those symptoms. The disk of our home galaxy, the Milky Way, is bigger than we previously thought. A new study shows it would take 200,000 years for a spaceship traveling at the speed of light to go across the entire galaxy, at light speed. The number of people older than you decreases each day, and the number of people younger than you increases each day. Necrophilia in wars and battlefields. It is known that at the time of violent death, the victim suffers from spasms of the anal sphincter. Many potential necrophiles have sought to take advantage of this fact by engaging in anal intercourse with dying soldiers on a battlefield. Soldiers during the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878 and Moroccan campaigns of 1919 to 1926 were violated in this way on the battlefield. 45. The practice has been termed warm necrophilia, although the term is more suitably applied elsewhere. Please see Chapter 3, Classification. The Chinese are known to engage in sexual intercourse with geese and to kill them intentionally at the point of ejaculation for similar reasons. 1. During the infamous Nanjing Massacre, often referred to as a word of Nanking, in 1937, Japanese soldiers worded an estimated 80,000 Chinese women. Since the Japanese army had officially outlawed the word of enemy women, Japanese soldiers found it convenient to murder Chinese women after wording them. In many cases, Chinese men were forced to commit acts of necrophilia, forced necrophilia, on the murdered women. 48. At least one Chinese man was murdered because he refused to commit necrophilia with the corpse of a woman in the snow. 49. Marilyn Monroe's case, 1962. It has been alleged that necrophilia was committed on Marilyn Monroe's dead body, too, after she died on August 5, 1962. 53. Aomazu Noguchi, who performed Monroe's autopsy, found 8 mg of chloral hydrate in her blood and 13 mg of pentobarbital, nembutal, in her liver tissue. On this basis, the cause of death was given as suicidal overdose of barbiturates. However, Noguchi also noted a fresh bruise spanning Monroe's lower back and hip which might have indicated violence, but this was ignored. 53. Deputy Coroner Lionel Grandison signed the death certificate under protest and later resigned his position. In 1978, he disputed the ended-life diagnosis, claiming his signature was forced. He also described numerous bruises on Monroe's corpse that were not listed in Noguchi's report, suggesting a violent struggle prior to death. He claimed that one or more necrophiles employed at the county morgue had violated Monroe's corpse before it was released for burial. A brain aneurysm can kill you at any time. A gamma-ray burst, or even a cosmic ray storm, could cause a near-instant mass extinction event. These both, probably, have affected life on Earth before. Both are common events in space, basically random, and our only protection is the vastness of space. That the majority of humans will wait until life-threatening problems become unsolvable before they try to fix them. For every one human cell in your body, scientists estimate there are 1 to 10 non-human cells, aka lots of little microorganisms living inside you. There are about 6 U.S. nuclear weapons that are currently unaccounted for, Broken Arrow, and several times that number missing from Russia. That slavery is still one of the biggest profiting trades in the world. If we see a life-threatening meteor is going to strike us in a few years, we probably, at least at the moment, couldn't do anything about it. They've had training simulations with this exact scenario, and they only got it right like 10% of the time. They need more like 10 years to reliably and consistently stop it. IDK about most disturbing but most pre-ground coffee contains a certain amount of cockroaches and other bugs. When they get the coffee beans in Madagascar, there's so many roaches living in it that it's too much time and effort to sort them all out. So, a lot of pre-ground coffee is allowed to have a certain amount of cockroach in it. Now you know why some coffee has so much protein. Prions. They are proteins that make normal proteins in your brain fold abnormally, causing neurological decay and various prion diseases. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is one example. CJD may occur spontaneously, be inherited, or be transmitted by contact with infected tissue, such as during a transplant or from eating contaminated meat. Once this starts, it's 100% fatal. Most often within 1 year, you're dead. No cure. You can kill the prion with several hours of heat at 900 F. This obviously kills the person too. Thankfully it's rare. Less than 1,000 cases per year in the US. Still scares the crap out of me. Babies don't have kneecaps. The youngest person to ever give birth was 5 years old, Lena Medina. Just think of what happened to the poor girl. That you can have a cancer but you don't know about it. There are spiders that capture bats in South America. The liver can be ruptured in one punch. Liver is the second most fragile organ in the human body. That there is anywhere between 25 to 50 active serial killers in the United States, according to the FBI. I work as an anesthesiologist. I've put people to sleep in an emergency situation knowing that they will almost certainly not survive the surgery. These are generally situations where without surgery the patient will not survive, but even with surgery the chances of survival are still small. In most of these instances the patients are too obtunded or aren't conscious enough to be aware of the gravity of their situation, but in a number of instances the patients have been conscious, talking although clearly anxious. I try to reassure and tell the person that we won't leave their side, that we will take care of them and that they will be fine. It kind of F's me up a bit to say this to someone, but I always include the last part because I just don't see the point in telling them the truth. I had one guy tell me he felt like he wasn't going to make it. I told him he would make it but knew he wasn't going to. I put him to sleep knowing that the last human face he would see before he died was mine as he stared up at me as I held an oxygen mask over his mouth and nose. I'd consider myself quite a resilient person, but knowing this stuff is a bit of a load to carry around.
Like, subscribe, and check out our TikTok for more content. See you next time.